We just hope for the best.
Yes, we
I
hope for the best.
actually I don't like this word. People have been saying I hope, I hope.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wendy Goals. I'm a co founder and co curator here at Park Art Center in Ville Park, and we're proud to introduce Didier Nolet. He is a French artist from Paris who's been painting for over 45 years and currently has a solo show here. After meeting a young American woman in Paris in 1979, he fell in love and moved to Chicago, and they got married. His first paintings that he created in Chicago were a blending of visions of childhood memories. So, welcome to Park Art Center, Didier.
Thank you very much.
So,
Thank you
tell.
for
Oh, yeah.
giving me this opportunity to have my work displayed here. It's a wonderful space, and more people should know about it. The
Absolutely.
show is terrific and easy to park, handicap accessible. Everybody has to know all the details, you know.
Yeah. So, tell us, where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Paris, and but I grew up in the south suburbs of Paris, and I was had a pretty simple, quiet life, you know. No crime, nothing. I even didn't have the key of the house. If I would go out, my parents said, "Ah, you don't need a key. We're sleeping. Just open the door and close the door. Don't lock it." So it was very simple, and I wanted to do art since I was very young. Actually, I remember doing some paintings and some ceramics with my teacher in primary school. I still have a plate of a bird that I did with my teacher. So that was my very first piece of art.
Oh, that's nice. What school did you attend?
Well, that was a primary school, so I can't remember the name of the school
Oh,
then, but I used to go walk there all the time and go into the little path, and the suburb was still kind of almost the countryside. You know, there was still a farm there. But after that, I went to this was primary, you know, very little kids. And after that, I went to a primary school. It's called Pierre Caron. No, that wasn't another Pierre Curie. And after that, you know, actually I did it by going to college to studying engineering, but I didn't want to do that. So after getting my degree and started to work for a company, 6 months later I quit and entered the Beaux-Arts school.
and a
And
lot of people are happy about that, I think.
so my parents were pretty worried about it. Say, "Oh my God, he had a terrific job. Now he's going to be starving."
Oh, wow. Well, what made you move to Chicago?
Well, I was invited to a party, and some friends told me there's an young American woman who is staying at somebody's house in the suburbs, and they're having a party. So we saw that all the parties start at 10 p.m. We got there, and it was a dinner with parents on the table. Dinner was over. So I just went there, and I loved her right away, and I said to her, "Do you want to come to see my etchings?"
Oh.
And and she did, and I said to her, "I'll come to visit Chicago," and it was in October '79. Came to Chicago October 27th, 1979, and we're still together, married, and that was the beginning of a long adventure, and it's not over yet.
Oh, started with love. So, who were the people who had the most impact on you, and how did it influence your work?
Well, I think there's a lot of people, but I think the first was probably my teacher in kindergarten, you know, who inspired me to love art. And we're doing a lot of things and including ceramics. And after in primary school, did more art. I remember one teacher also was the art teacher, and he was an artist and doing a lot of art in that uh, with him in that class. And growing up, After that, going to that engineering school, one teacher was an artist also himself, and he wanted that I enter the what's called the École des Arts Déco. The There's two main schools in Paris: the Beaux-Arts, École des Beaux-Arts, and École des Arts Déco, and that's what you're studying to be mostly an interior designer. And it was a competition, and I entered the competition, but I wasn't done for that. Actually, I failed the test. But then I entered the Beaux-Arts school, and it's first day I went there, and I knew it was for me. I felt I became an artist the second I entered the school. So my teacher there had a strong influence on my work. Also, it was Pierre Caron, who was actually he retired, but he was the last figurative artist in that school. And his friend Pierre Faure, and there was also a sculptor, Georges Jean-Claude, who became very famous in France, who died some years ago. But other artists also. I wasn't. We used to go to the Louvre to study old masters, and at Pompidou Center to study contemporary masters. So I discovered the work of artists that I really love strongly, and that includes, from actually the cave paintings from Lascaux and from other artists from the Renaissance, from Piero da Francesca and other artists, well, like Delacroix and other artists from more recent, uh, Balthus, who died. But your work evolved, you're inspired by some artists, and your first paintings, you see the influence, and you become your own source of inspiration. You create your own work. It's not anymore a copy, or you don't see the trace anymore, or the marks of the source of inspirations of other artists.
Right. Oh. Well, you've been painting for over 45 years, so what are you trying to express through your paintings?
Well, the main thing that I was trying, like you said, when I moved to Chicago, my daughter was born, and then my wife went back to school. So I was in Chicago. It was winter. I barely spoke any English, and I was in charge of a little baby, and so and then I love that job actually. You know, it's I had to reinvent myself from having you know, the life of an artist in Paris and being a father and responsible. So I didn't know anything about Chicago. I didn't know any English, and I had to think about everything that I knew was from the past. And I started to remember my childhood memories and visions of France where I grew up, and going traveling with my parents and other uncles, and all different visions started to blend together. And I had this idea of putting that together and creating some paintings that reflect this blending of memories. But they were just not just blending of memories; they also started to translate a state of mind. So it's not about the beauty of nature; it's more about how you interpret the the landscapes. And some landscapes can be serene and very peaceful, and that reflects when you at peace. And some other landscape are boom, 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 and when
Yeah.
things are a bit rougher in your life,
Yes.
it's not all the same.
Yes. I know that's how I feel when I look at your work. Um, so, what are the sources of your inspiration? Do you have?
Well, it goes from period to period. So these
Right.
paintings were directly inspired by my childhood memories.
Right.
But after being in the States for years, um, I did also before I go into landscape, I painted a lot of figures, and including my daughter, and I did some life-size figures, but they was kind of surreal. And I did one painting that was a kind of a turning point. It's like a 9 foot piece, and I can't tell you how it came out. I think it came out straight out of a dream. And there's a big car, and it looks like you from looking out of a barn. You see just a post supporting the roof of the barn and the landscape. So the car is in one part of the piece, the painting, divided by this post, and there's a nude baby in the other part that's more vertical. So each one is as his own frame, and the baby is holding the car with a rope.
Ooh.
And some art critics said it maybe it's the umbilical cord.
Yeah.
But anyway, from there, wanted to remove the figures eventually and just do landscapes. So I started to paint landscapes, but they went from period to period. So landscape went from directly inspired by childhood memories to have some influenced by my life and vision in the U.S. And eventually we moved to Arizona. Actually, it was a long story. My wife wanted to open a boutique in Provence. We had a house in Lakeview that we had under rehab for 10 years, built a nice studio and everything. It was almost completely finished, quadruple inside, completely gutted, and redid everything while living there. Pretty difficult.
Yes, and through that.
And we, my wife, so she was reading this book about Provence. So we decided to sell the house. We moved to Provence. She opened a boutique, and we realized that was not going to work out. After 7 months, we packed everything, and we moved to Phoenix. And she had a couple of Western wear stores that became eventually world clothing. So I started to paint some couple of desert landscapes, but we knew that Arizona was not quite for us, and it was difficult to run the store. So we decided to close the shop and move back to Chicago. And the first thing that did when we moved back to Chicago is paint some big waves. I guess I missed the lake. And I also wanted to loosen up my strokes. So I started to use much looser strokes and throw the paint on a canvas with creating, when you try to paint drop of water, waves, it's just, you don't want to paint it one at a time. So I said, what I know, just hit the brush, would I hold a brush and hit that with my wrist and see what's going to happen.
Right. That's what the question I was going to ask you was how do you start a painting and what's the process, that you use?
Well, the process is from you have a vision. Well, let me finish first about
Okay,
the waves. Anyway, so it's what I did, but that was the water, and then after that was winter. After I painted fire, and after I painted one fire got too hot, I painted rain. So, but that's the evolution of the different periods. But the process of painting goes from you have a vision, and you take a sketchbook and make some thumbnail sketches. So I don't go directly on the canvas starting that because I did that once and realized that I kept changing things all the time. My vision was there, but it's vague. It's like an image in your head, and you say, "Oh, I think the mountain would be better on the left." And you're working on 9 foot painting, and so you move the mountain from the right to the left, and move the tree from the left to the right, and you keep changing things. So I thought it's better to changing a little bit to little drawings, and much easier to erase that with pencil. You figure out the composition, the main blocks in your painting. Then from there, you do a little bit of studies. So you kind of figure out the colors, and from the studies, you go to the final image. It doesn't mean that you're going to have to copy strictly the studies, but that's a process going from small sketch to studies to the final image. And then the final image, you really push it to whatever you want, to
Right.
a point that you think this is done.
Right. We have some studies on our walls here, so I think it's really interesting to see the step
Yes,
after.
and I got piles of sketchbooks, and I can see that some big pieces started with a little image, very small, and a few changes in the composition. But I was flipping through some sketchbooks the other day, and I still have them, and say, oh, that's a 9 foot piece started with something the size of I don't know, 3 inches drawing,
Yeah.
or less. So, but that's basically the process, and I'm basically mostly paint with oil, acrylic also, but I'm using other mediums. I've been using a lot of watercolors, soft pastel. For 2 years, did tons of soft pastels, and I've been using oil pastels now, but I'm using a specific brand because that's the only one that makes them so buttery. That's a Sonyeli brand that was Picasso approached them in 1949 and asked them if they could come up with a medium that they could use on any surface with any brush, anything. So they came out with that oil pastel, and I love them. They're so buttery. It's like
Butter,
creamy.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I like them too. How long does it take for you to create a painting?
Well, that's
It
the
all depends,
yeah,
yeah.
that's the trick. Actually, I don't give myself a time limit, so I have two paintings done of the same size, and one is took me without the studies 3 weeks, and the one took me 3 years. So it's between 3 weeks and 3 years.
3 weeks and 3 years. How do you decide when it's finished?
Well, when you know that's not it's not pushed to this maximum. I think I tried. I was remember being interviewed on radio, and I was trying to explain that when I do a painting, it's like I'm trying to put a knife and take the knife by the handle, lift it and leave it on its tip, and when I leave my finger, the knife stays in perfect balance. So if I push that too much,
Yeah.
the knife falls. It, it, so you can push things to a point, and then it tips over. It loses the balance. So the fine point is very, you know, you can push and push and push, and then
Mhm.
you ruin it.
Well, I think you're very fortunate to know when to stop
Well,
because a lot of artists struggle with that.
yeah.
That was why I asked. It
The
is
the
very
thing is
hard.
that's one thing with painting.
Mhm.
Sometimes the best version is underneath. If you're a musician or a writer, you can compare or photographer can compare different visions with painting. So yeah, I remember some people when I was younger, people you more not so sure of yourself, and people came to my studio and they said, "Oh, I think you should do this. I think you should do that." So I listened to them, and I was sorry because it was better before.
Yeah.
So don't listen to everybody. Lock the door of your studio.
So can you tell us how your work evolved over the years? That's a very, very long time to paint.
Yeah, well, as I was trying to say a little bit earlier, I did some landscape figures,
Right.
and then landscapes. They were inspired by my childhood memories.
Right.
Eventually, could see the influence of the American landscapes, and when we moved to Phoenix, I did a few Southwest landscapes. So there was the next step, but not too many. Actually, I had a show in Scottsdale, and I had a show at the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale. I was showing with one of the top galleries in Scottsdale, and everybody were writing notes on the book. Somebody said, "Too green."
Too green?
Yeah. So when I moved to Chicago, I thought Arizona was too dry, and I missed the lake, so I painted these waves. I did a whole series of big waves. I really that was so. The turning point was also maybe I missed the lake, but I also thought I started to paint too tight, and I wanted to find a way to loosen up the brush strokes.
Mhm.
So painting looser with painting the waves forces me to paint looser, and
Mm.
as I was saying, throwing the paint on the canvas. But eventually, I used to go running to the forest preserve every other day, long runs in winter. This one was inspired by one of my runs, and I would come back and just have this vision of the forest preserve in winter with the you could see somehow come to the end of the day and you have this streak of light at the horizon between the trees. The trees would be like a lace and then the light behind, and I would come back home and sketch things, just the vision. And I paint winter for a long time. I found that winter is very mysterious, very it's a it's a frozen moment.
Yes.
So I said always I want to paint a frozen moment. It's definitely a frozen moment.
Yes.
And I couldn't stop painting winter, and people said, winter is hard to sell. But I said I don't care. I'm gonna do. I don't want to paint just for commercial reason. And but after painting winter for so many years, I was in my backyard at the end of one winter. I built a fire out of my fire pit, big fire, and that's when I thought, wow, that's really warms me up. I need to paint that. It's so powerful. Started to paint fire, and after painting fire for one full year, I thought, that's good, but there's a lot of yellow, a lot of red. Maybe I can try to experiment with something else. And naturally, the next series was the rain series, and they were all. And I tried to also change my vision. Square format, 50 by 50, and all much closer. No distant paintings. Like in the past, I even did some aerial view, like you suspended in a balloon, looking at the landscape from a view from high above. These are you almost against the tree or in the tree. Like I remember when I grew up, we had a weeping willow right outside my window. We used to climb these trees. I remember climbing trees all the time. It's maybe come back from that vision to be in the trees and right against the foliage. So I did that series of paintings of being right against the foliage and with a sense of the rain series because of a sense of rain and dripping along against the foliage. And it evolves now, it becomes more like the wind series. So there's like a complete evolution from series to series. And the willows are an important part of my paintings. I don't know, maybe because of these willows, but I find willows very mysterious. So at that point, I started to think about why don't I try to change the shape of the canvas and do something a little bit different. And that's this idea to, in the past, I've thought about doing shapes, but I came with this. This is a study for painting, and I built this. Actually, it's a teardrop shaped canvas, and I painted that teardrop chest canvas. It was in a show. I was invited to a show called Chicago Artists Interpret Shakespeare. It was at the Fourth Presbyterian Church on Michigan Avenue. It's like looks like Gothic old church, and actually this piece became the study for larger piece, which is the proportion changed a little bit. It's slimmer. It's like 77 inches tall, and I'm still working, trying to build these stretchers of shapes.
Yes,
And
we were very fortunate to visit you at your studio, and you have so many paintings in that studio and so many interesting things. I could have spent the whole day there. And we did. I want to know, and I want you to explain how you create this shaped framing. I think it is so interesting and, to a perfection. The finishing of it is just fantastic. Can you explain that?
well, actually, I was trying to figure out, and I was looking at what kind of power tool I need to buy. and I had an inexpensive jigsaw, and I made some circular pieces, and I built them by overlapping 1 by 4 pieces of wood, like 3/4 of an inch, 1 by 4, and gluing them together and tracing a circle and cutting that. It was pretty hard to cut it. But I was talking to some guy who teaches woodworking at the Evanston Art Center, and he said, "Come to my workshop. We have this big piece of equipment. You can cut it out of a piece of plywood, and you put the piece of plywood, you enter the shape into a computer, and it can be cut out, and we can cut more from the outside. You can have smaller. So you start with the outside." But I realized that the shape was not perfect when it came out because the design into the computer was not absolutely perfect. And it's probably because I emailed this image to this guy and I did it kind of by hand. So I had to really rework the shape by sanding and just recut it. And so when I built the larger one, I had also to really recut the shape and using a jigsaw, electric jigsaw power tool, and then to put some crossbars and to build a ledge and all different things. And now I have a shape that's pretty perfect, and I bought some more wood and just trace on, but I don't want to repeat the same shape again and again. So just trying to, every time you have to figure out how you can build that and just find an idea. And then the frame, that's the frame also is part of the job. I take some, especially for the big one, I take some lattice and I put 2 pieces of plastic garter together, put some caulking caps at the end, fill that in water and soak the lattice for a full day. So it's very flexible. Then you have another shape ready. You bend it, clamp it, and let it dry. And then you paint it, and you can nail it. And then you have to finish the tip because the tip is not going to be perfect with some plastic wood putty. And just so
That's
you know,
amazing.
it's not part of the painting process, but it's part of the piece.
Oh,
The frame become part of the painting.
right, absolutely. That's where the engineer, I guess, comes out in you, right?
Maybe, and my father was a cabinet maker, so
Oh, my
I
goodness.
played with his tools many times. He said, "Don't touch my tools," and then when I'm not home, I try to do it, and I use the wrong tools. So I try to take a nail out of a piece of with a board with a chisel and cut my nail in half. And so I remember that next time I'll do better. Learning, you cut yourself and you don't do it too many times.
So these are the paintings you're working on currently.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I finished one large, and I don't time it how long it's going to take me. So I'm working on the others, and I was thinking about one is vertical, and I'm working on a horizontal one. But sometimes you want to make your paintings dance together. So I was thinking about this vertical piece going this way, and maybe having another one that's going to be, one is going that way and the other one go that way, and you put them in a show. It creates an interesting movement of the paintings this way, and the other one. It's like dancers,
You know,
like
you
a ballet
know how
or
the
something.
frame finishes off the painting. You're kind of finishing off. Like you're part of it too. Like just listening to you talk, I love to listen to you talk.
Thank
Oh,
you.
your wording. How do you define your style of painting? What would you call it?
Well, I never call my work. Actually, I was trying to figure out myself, but I thought I'm not really a realist artist because it comes out more. It's not like I started to paint outside what we call plein air because I was decided to teach those classes, but mostly it comes out of dreams, out of visions, out of my images that's in my head. So they are not like something I go and paint nature. But I got interviewed by this art critic and artist on WFMT, Harry Boas, and he called my work contemporary romantic. And
Contemporary
maybe
romantic.
that's what it could be called, and still try to figure out.
Well, do you have a gallery that represents your work in Chicago? Is
Well, yeah, actually, I've been with many galleries in Chicago and across the country, and even in Paris. And I was for years with Truvy until it closed, and I moved with Anne Nathan and Leiden and Pyramidar and even Eva Cohon, I remember. Now the current gallery is Addington Gallery on Wall Street, just
I
south
see.
of Superior. And I like to work with Dan Addington. He's a very nice guy. He's very easygoing. He's very easy to approach and to communicate with. So
That's important.
we have a show planned for next spring. We haven't scheduled the month yet, but probably like May or June 2017.
Great, great. So why are you painting skulls? Is my last question.
Oh, it just happens, you know. I've been painting on forums. I've been invited to be part of some events in Highland Park on fiberglass forms. So I painted on butterflies, like 40-inch butterflies. I painted a 5 foot peacock. I painted benches, and some also years ago, some years ago, I painted on ostrich eggs. I was invited to be at a painting on ostrich egg for fundraising, and so some other people gave me more ostrich eggs. I painted on ostrich eggs, and a student of mine came to class and she said, "I've got a scar. Do you want paint on it?" And she said, "Don't worry, it's not a real one. You know, it's
I hope
man-made."
not.
So I painted on that skull, and I thought it was very interesting. I started to figure out why, what does it do to the skull, and I thought it give another life to the skull. So I painted more skulls, and I call them rebirths.
Mm.
So it's definitely not about death.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Thank you.
Absolutely
It
beautiful.
just and I gave them some little French name, Paul, Pierre, Jacques.
Yeah. Any relation to your professor back then?
No, no,
Pierre?
just try to figure out what is typical of the French first names.
Right,
You know,
Francois.
Francois, yes.
Well, we're going to take some questions from the audience that we have here. So, does anybody have any questions for Didier? Any? Go ahead.
When was the last time you were in Paris?
Well, actually, was not for that such a great thing. My brother, when my older brother called me, he said, "Dad passed out in they retired in southwest of France, so they bought a field. Eventually, they had a house. They built a house there, and they retired there. So he said, Dad passed out in the village, Moricoud it's called, and he's been sent to a hospital, and they found out that he had cancer that spread out all over. So they said it was nothing they could do. And he would be the kind of person never would go to see the doctor because my mother had Parkinson's disease and would say, Mom is the one that we have to worry about. Don't worry about me. So my older brother said, You better come soon because he has not much time left. And there was a time that was difficult to get a passport, and I didn't have any. So I got a letter from the hospital. It had to be officially translated into English. I went to all the paperwork at the seat to get my passport. In an hour, I got my passport. The next day, I was on a plane, and my brother picked me up and went to a cafe. We were outside a cafe, and my mother called. She said, "You know, we're planning to go there the next Saturday," and she said, "You better come right away." Because his blood pressure is dropping like crazy. We drove like crazy, it's 600 miles, I don't know. Halfway through, my mother said it's too late.
Oh.
So we got there. She was very confused, and we got to their house, and I said, we better not cry. What we have to do now is remember all the funny things about him, because he had a lot of funny things. And I said, we have to engrave all the stupid jokes that he would say on his tombstones. And he said, we need to doing something strong, and looking for some liquor in the cabinet. And my brother said, I know where it is, don't worry about it. And we had a shot. He said, to dad. We had three of them. And maybe it was too much. The next day I woke up, I was at vertigo.
Oh no. Oh no.
But that was the last time I went to France. And now I miss my mother died like at the end of I think August or early September. So then that was the prime of living far away from your family. So now they say don't worry about it. Don't let's get together next summer.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, it happens. We have parents, and eventually you have to become. Now you're grown up. You can call mom and dad. Say, like, "Mom, I got a boo boo." No, I can call her.
Oh.
Maybe I can, but
Does anybody else have a question?
And pardon me if you mentioned this. Did you say you used to do portraits?
I did portrait. I did my daughter a bunch of times, and I did my daughter. I did portrait, even portrait commissions. I remember doing that for some clients. I remember painting one of my first collectors was Bob Fields, very good, was still good friend. He asked me if I could paint his daughter. So we're renting an apartment by Evening Park Road and Central in Chicago. It was Central Park, forgot the name of the street. But anyway, she came to pose many times, and she was 13. Now it was a full size, full length. Now she's married. She has an eyewear shop, I Spy, it's called, and she has kids.
Yeah.
So I did a double portrait of some other collectors.
Yeah. You still take commissions for that? I mean, do you still
I don't do
take
commission
requests?
portraits,
Okay.
but I done not too long ago, a few years ago, a double portrait of artist friends,
Mhm.
and I painted them back to back. They had against each other, and they standing in front of the painting of mine actually, and I just did the heads, but I can't call myself anymore a portrait or figure artist because I haven't done that for years,
Mhm.
and if people would ask me, I probably would do it, but I'm more interested in the abstraction of. I find there's more freedom of expression when I do some landscapes because if you started to do a portrait, people want to be sure they look beautiful and this and that. And when I do a landscape, I got a lot more freedom of changing things.
That's understandable.
What would you say is your favorite painting that you've done?
Well, that's a tricky one. It's the last one. I've got one that I really like, but maybe I did one that I call Silence, and it's like forgot exactly. It's 72 by 96 or something like that. And I remember going to a place with some friends when I was a kid. It's along the Seine River. It's called Chateau Gaillard. It was a big place. It was some battles between the English and the French when the English were in France, and it's pretty much in ruin, but it's on top of a hill, and you see the Seine River swinging. And I had this vision of doing this painting and having this vision of the Seine River, but it's I added in that vision. You don't see there's no castle. There's some fields and it's very green, and some hills in the horizon. So there's not much hills in that place. You're on top of hill where the castle is, but the rest is a little bit flatter. So, but it was inspired by that, and I call it Silence. It's almost a quiet moment. You feel like it's suspended in the air. There's no sound, and it's like a very quiet. So that's one piece that I really like. But the painting is my daughter. I painted my wife also laying on the couch, and she has her eyes closed, and she's as the radio she had right there on the floor, a cup of tea. She would be drinking iced tea all the time. And there's a French window up, and you see a little bit of garden. And I forgot how to call it. Like you feel like maybe there's a little breeze coming through the window, and it's very quiet.
How
So-
long ago was that?
Oh, that's a long time ago. It's when my daughter was a little baby, so that's a while ago. I don't have hardly any figures. All these pieces were sold. I even did a double portrait of my in-laws, and they said, "Oh, we're sorry, we didn't buy it. Somebody bought it, and it's now in San Francisco." And they were the double portrait. They like sitting at facing each other across a long table, and my father-in-law is like this, holding a cigar, and my mother-in-law, I forgot what she's doing. She's looking at him. It's looking at each other.
Any other questions?
Question, Did have you put figures in your landscapes?
Oh, that's actually it was one that was mentioned in the car with the baby. So that was the transition. I mean, that's the first thing that we see the transition, because the figures were mostly indoor. Except there's a guy jumping out of a window, but that's another story. And it's not about suicide. People thought that it was about suicide, but it was more about doing flying. So he's like jumping, and he wants to fly. And but otherwise, all the figures I can indoors. And from that moment when I painted its car and baby, there was the background is all landscapes, and I started to eventually do only the landscapes.
Anybody else?
What's next? What's your next?
Well, it's you don't know, because the last paintings are a stepping stone, and it's like I think it's like almost you're in a room, and there's a door at the end of the room, and you push the door, you see a little bit of a crack, and you don't know what's in the next room. It's Alice in the Wonderland, and then you're going to see what's in the next room, and it leads you to something else. So each painting is each painting and each period is a stepping stone to another period. So the Rain series led to the Wind series. So they're like sets of wind blowing through branches, and these weeping willows, they always lead to something new, and you're not quite sure. It just comes on its own. I don't have a battle plan. It's just an evolution, and you let it go naturally. You don't try to say, "Oh, I'm gonna do this and that and that and that, and I got here. This is what it's planned for the next 10 years." It's a pretty natural evolution.
Right. Yes.
This is just a technical question on acrylics, basically, on your massive paintings that take over 3 weeks to complete. When you mix the colors, do you save it? Do you make the mix colors in big batches and make notes of how you mixed it, or you just do it the mixing on the fly?
Well, some paintings I do need to mix a lot of paint. Actually, there's a video on my website. There's a friend of mine who created a video. He filmed me for 5 months. He ended by editing hours of filming, and he came to a 4.5 minute video that on YouTube. And you see, like, I mix so much paint, but it's very hard to calculate how much paint you're gonna need. Sometimes you have some left over. I don't throw it away. I take some foil, I fold it a couple times, make a little gutter, and at the end of my session, I take the paint and put it back in foil, seal it, and it can stay good like this for a while. So go back, s- take things out of that foil, and we use it.
If you had to, would you be able to duplicate the painting behind you?
Duplicate.
Yeah.
Some artists do that, you know. If you have to do it, if it's a commission, you probably can do it. But I don't like to copy myself, so.
Yeah. Well,
And
Yes.
we have a question online about the skulls that you have in the show. How did you start painting? Why are you painting the skulls?
Well, I was explaining that I was painting on 3D shapes, and somebody gave me brought me a skull to class. She said, "I know you have been painting on shapes, and here's one skull. Maybe you can use it." So I started to thought maybe I can paint some landscapes on the skulls. So I did one, and then I was so interested, so I got more. I even did some other skulls that's more like rocks, like mountains and rocks, and I thought that was pretty interesting, and I thought, well, I don't think about death when I paint on a skull. And I've got some animal skulls in my studio that some people gave me, and I haven't used them yet. But I thought it's more like reinventing the skull, so give them another life, another chance. So I call them rebirth. I thought it was when you look at them, even if it would be a real skull, you see people have been doing that in like South Americans in Mexico, and they put beads and stones and diamonds on skulls and everything. It was Nikit Safal, this artist who had this giant things, puppets made out of fiberglass with fountains. She was, I think she was from French. She has French roots, and she grew up in New York. And the skull is complete covers with mirrors, and you don't think about death when you look at them. So it's definitely gives them another life, another chance, and they are very quiet.
okay. Any other questions online in the audience? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming and tuning in. The exhibit here will continue through January 7th. So we hope to see everyone here at Park Art Center. Thank you.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you so
giving me
much.
this
Okay,
opportunity. Thank you.